Now we're joining us for more on the story is Jabu Mahlangu, who is the SANCO national spokesperson. So thank you so much for joining us right here on Newsroom. Now, what does Maghuve's resignation mean for the SABC board?
Well, our view is that we welcome his resignation. We've actually been calling for the dissolution of the board for quite some time and calling on him to resign. Indeed, he has taken his time before he makes this decision. In the process, has costed the public purse quite a lot of money, and therefore our view is that he needs to account for other things that he had failed to do. Inquisied about his knowledge of the SABC 8, he said no, he has no knowledge. Quizzed on other matters of decision of the change on the policies, he said he doesn't know. He almost did not know anything. Firing off the board members, senior members of the SABC, he didn't know. He defied Parliament when he was called to come and account and submit certain documents. He claimed not to have known anything. He went to litigate, and he was told that he has to pay out of his own pocket. He said no, he was not aware. He was not aware of almost everything that happens around him. And according to what we picked up in the media and from the hearings in Parliament, he lied under oath. So I think he still has a lot to answer. And indeed, everyone who's employed in the public space where he has to serve the public, the poor, the dispossessed, has a responsibility to account for their decision or their failure to decide. And our view is that Mr. Maghuve, Professor Maghuve, and all others that have served the board at the senior level and everywhere else need to account for their deeds. We expect not this from him alone, but from all other people who serve in the public space, be it politicians and whoever else.
Actually say Maghuve's lone fight to hold on to the SABC being a worthwhile exercise.
Well, it was unnecessary, but remember, the law is structured in such a way that before you can fire anyone, especially amongst the board, an inquiry must be held. And this inquiry has been quite costly, I assume. And the cost of this inquiry will go a long way. There were summons issued and a host of other things. Some of the things that happened could have been avoided by people who are holding public office. Holding public office is not a right. It is an opportunity, and people need to treat it with the respect that it is deserved.
Now that Mr. Maghuve actually hasn't really specified his reasons behind his resignation, what would you say were the possible reasons of him stepping down at this very crucial moment after he actually said himself that he wasn't willing to back down?
Well, he's always told the inquiry that he gets advice from his lawyers. His lawyers have costed him a lot. I don't think they advised him adequately, but Mr. Maghuve is a professor. Before you become a professor, you should have been growing in your academic knowledge and acquire necessary knowledge that bestows you the title. Therefore, if as a professor you do not know what your fiduciary responsibilities are, you do not know as to what your responsibilities to the public and the office you're holding are, then it raises very important questions about you as a person, your character, as well as your acquired academic qualifications. So, whilst you may depend on legal advice, surely you must have in you the ability to discern between the right and the wrong.
So thank you so much for joining us right here on Newsroom, and thank you so much for your update and your opinions on that specific story. Now joining us on the phone line is Maghuve, who's the spokesperson for Right to Know. So thank you so much for joining us right here on Newsroom. Now Maghuve was the only remaining member on the board. Was this expected to happen? What's your reaction towards his resignation?
Well, at the point he was in, once the inquiry began, in the position he was in, it was very hard for him to really do much other than some last-ditch effort to try and save his skin, which is exactly what he's doing now. It's far too little, too late. He has clung in there to the last, and this is just a futile attempt to try and save himself. What's come out of the inquiry has been absolutely damning, unsurprisingly, and he could be liable for charges, not just him, but the cabal around Hlaudi Motsoeneng and, of course, Mr. Motsoeneng himself. So they must be scared. Their support base has completely fallen out from underneath them. And so this is, it's plain to see what this is. It's a last-ditch effort to try and save himself. But we would fully support efforts to bring people like Maghuve and Motsoeneng to trial, because what they have been implicated in is nothing short of criminal.
Lone fight to hold on to the SABC, would you say it's been a worthwhile exercise?
Sorry, the inquiry is that?
No, Mr. Maghuve's lone fight, now holding on to the SABC this long, would you say that it's been a worthwhile exercise?
It's been completely futile on his part. We've always wondered what it was that led people like Maghuve and others to hang on to the last. What it was that led them to give such unquestioning support to Mr. Motsoeneng, and to refuse to step down when others around them, like Krishnaidu, for instance, were jumping ship. Were saying this has gone far too far. I cannot, in good conscience, continue to be part of this. And one potential reason is that they have things to hide, that they're buying time because they know that once they're out of there, once things come to light, like what has happened in the inquiry, they could be held liable for corruption and fraud and the sorts of things that Outer has brought up in its laying of charges against SABC management.
And now, lastly, what does this actually mean for the parliamentary inquiry on the SABC now moving on forward? What is likely to happen to the SABC parliamentary inquiry?
Well, I should hope it will continue to go ahead. A lot has come to light. There have been absolutely damning allegations, things that were not so much in the public eye. The talk of dodgy deals cut with the Guptas. The multi-choice deal has also been on the radar. So we hope that these will be further explored. A lot still needs to be uncovered, and hopefully we'll see charges. We'll see Maghuve, Motsoeneng, and their allies face court. We think there's absolutely damning evidence that's come to light in the inquiry that means that they should, quite frankly, be locked up. They have been in absolute contempt of court. They have defied Parliament and they have defied the public protector. And the allegations of wrongdoing, and there's irrefutable evidence of it on so many levels, means that these people are criminals.
Well, sir, thank you so much for joining us right here on Newsroom. Well, that was Right to Know spokesperson Maghuve just speaking more on Professor Mbulaheni Maghuve's resignation as the chairperson of the SABC board. Now, to also speak more on this, we are now joined on the phone line by Thandi Smith, who's the head of the Policy Unit, Media Monitoring and Africa. Well, Thandi, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Maghuve was the only remaining member on the board. What was expected? Was this actually expected to happen? What's your reaction on this?
Hi, thanks for having me. I don't know whether it was expected or not. It was definitely hoped for. I think that we welcome the decision for his resignation.
Now, are you actually satisfied with how Maghuve handled the entire inquiry and parliamentary process into the inquiry into the SABC fitness to hold office? How did he actually handle himself in the inquiry?
We were disappointed at the way that it was handled to begin with. But again, it wasn't surprising because we saw this kind of behavior from not only the chairperson, but many different, senior members at the SABC, not wanting to be held accountable for the bad governance and the bad decisions that had been taken at the SABC. So I don't think it was a surprise. It was disappointing, and we are particularly happy with the way that the inquiry has unfolded. and has taken place. And, although we are really happy about the chairperson's resignation now, and we think that it's definitely a step in the right direction, if he had resigned earlier, we may not have seen what we had seen come out of the inquiry. So maybe it's a good thing that he hadn't resigned earlier because, it did pave the way for the inquiry to happen, him keeping his position. And, having said that, it also, just because he has now resigned, doesn't fix the institutional issues that the SABC has. We've seen 12 different CEOs come through SABC in the last 8 years, and so this is not an isolated incident, and this is not an isolated crisis. If we do not let Parliament continue the inquiry and the due process, we're just going to see this repeated over and over again.
Before I let you go, what does this actually mean now for the parliamentary inquiry on the SABC?
Well, it's not going to change any of the process that will take place. The chairperson did appear before the inquiry in the end. The full inquiry did happen, and we're now waiting for the inquiry to pick up its work again in January and complete its report. And hopefully we'll see some good, positive recommendations coming out of that report, and we can then deal with the issues that come up.
Now, Mr. Maghuve actually didn't even really specify as to why he's actually stepping down from the board. Now, looking at some of the possible reasons, what would you say are some of the possible reasons of him stepping down at this very critical time?
I think that the pressures over the last couple of months were really indicative of him needing to resign. Whatever his reasons are, we really welcome the decision. I guess we unless it's made publicly known, we won't know exactly why he resigned, but it's definitely the right decision.
Well, Thandi, thank you so much for joining us right here on Newsroom, and thank you so much for your input. Well, now also joining us on the phone line is Professor Sipho Seabe, who is a political analyst. Mr. Seabe, thank you so much for joining us right here on Newsroom. Now, what does Maghuve's resignation mean for the SABC board?
Well, what it means is that it is dysfunctional, that what the committee set out to show has been fulfilled, but this was fulfilled much earlier. You cannot have a board that operates with one non-executive and only a chairperson. So what we should be asking is whether this whole inquiry was worth it when the results were almost very clear. But most importantly, the inquiry also exposed a certain degree of abdication by parliamentarians. One of the witnesses, Professor Bongani Kumalo, made it very clear that inasmuch as the committee can huff and puff, it must remember that the board was selected by Parliament and that the board reports to Parliament. And therefore, every wrongdoing and commissions of errors and omissions must also be directed to Parliament, because Parliament should have done its work much earlier. So all this huffing and puffing is simply a form of grandstanding, because it was very clear, or it should have been very clear for a Parliament that works, or portfolio, that it should have done its work. So that was one of the things that emerged. But most importantly, I think it was surprising that the chairperson remained when it was very clear that the entire ad hoc committee was single-minded in terms of the outcome. We did not have to go through this charade to know what the outcome was going to be. But in a way, there are certain things that emerged that they would not have emerged had the exercise not been carried out. But the outcome was known beforehand. So the resignation by the chairperson doesn't add much value.
Now, do you believe that parliamentarians or Parliament must also take responsibility for what is going on at the SABC? Are they also to blame on the current crisis at the board?
Well, the point is the members of the board are appointed through Parliament. and those members of the board are also accountable directly to Parliament. And if it emerges that they may not have done their work properly, Parliament must also assume its failure in ensuring that it carries out its oversight responsibility. So in this case, there are a number of culprits, but it all starts with Parliament that selected the board and to whom the board accounts.
Mr. Sepe, thank you so much for joining us right here on Newsroom, and thank you so much for your time. Well, now for more on this specific story, also joining us is Cindy Mabe, who is the 8 and 7 senior anchor. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what does Maghuve's resignation mean for the SABC board?
Matapela, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. I think for the SABC board, it was defunct. It was a long time coming. We've seen even earlier this year with Jimmy Matthews and so many other senior executives and management resigning from the SABC that the centre was not holding. So what had happened, in my view, is that Professor Maghuve is either saving face, his own personal reputation and integrity. If you remember in the ad hoc committee, he found it very difficult in answering questions, saying that he was either not aware of what was going on or any wrongdoing, and also passing blame to former chairperson Ellen Shabalala, saying that she's the one that had convinced the board, in essence, to give Saudi Mutsuning the COO position. So I think for me, he's just divorcing himself out of a situation that has already gone bad from the get-go for a very long time.
Now, Cindy, would you perhaps say that parliamentarians and the much involvement in the SABC board is also much to blame for the going-ons in the SABC currently?
With the parliamentarians, they may have a case to answer as well, but you will know there were other interventions with the Auditor General citing mismanagement and maladministration and censorship within the SABC, including the Public Protector, and the remedial actions not being implemented. Instead, they were taken out of court. So for parliamentarians, they may have to just introspect and see where they could have salvaged the situation much sooner than what we currently have.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your input over there. Well, that was 8 and 7 senior anchor Cindy.